A hurricane watch is now in effect along the Texas and Louisiana coast as Laura moves towards the Gulf of Mexico. Good Monday evening, I'm Mike Naso here with the latest on Laura. Let's get right to it. Tropical Storm Laura, as of 5 p.m. from the National Hurricane Center, is at 21.7 north, 82.2 west, winds of 60, is moving west-northwest at 20, and right now that puts the center very, very near the Isle of Youth here in western Cuba, and we now have a hurricane watch in effect from Port Bolivar, Texas, to west of Morgan City, Louisiana, and we also have a tropical storm warning in effect for a lot of the southern coastline of Cuba, including the Isle of Youth, as well as the Florida Keys and the dry Tortugas, and now a tropical storm watch south of Port Bolivar to San Luis Pass, Texas, and of course from Morgan City, Louisiana to the mouth of the Mississippi. And all of these overrule any watches and warnings we had for Marco. We'll talk about Marco too, but it looks very, very poor. You can see the forecast here through time takes Laura over western Cuba tonight, into the Gulf tomorrow, and by tomorrow night and early Wednesday it should become a hurricane, Category 1, and then have a more intense, rapid rate of strengthening by the time Thursday rolls around and it makes landfall. It is forecast to be at least a Category 2, if not stronger, so it could be quite a powerful hurricane by the time Thursday rolls around. You can see the wind field with Laura here. The winds are impacting Cuba, and that will buffet the Florida Keys, and then it'll move into the Gulf, out of radar range and away from land, but it'll be headed for the Gulf Coast. So there's going to be a period of time where Laura won't be seen on radar, and winds won't be impacting anybody, thankfully. But that's when you're going to want to get your things prepared for the eventual landfall of what is expected to be at least a 105-mile-an-hour hurricane. Now here's the latest visible satellite imagery, and you can see the center of Laura is right in here, south of the Cuban mainland and over towards the northeast of the Isle of Youth. Now this area of western Cuba is very flat. San Cristobal and areas there of the Isle of Youth, very low-lying, very flat. The mountainous areas of Cuba are where Laura messed around yesterday over by Guantanamo. So it's not going to be impacted, it doesn't look like, very much by the island of Cuba, and then once it moves away from there and builds an inner core, we will likely see intensification. Here's the latest radar from western Cuba. Laura's been sucking off some dry air, and I think that impeded it a little bit, but you can still see right in here the core building. Most of the strong winds, as the Hurricane Center said, are off towards the south and east, but this is all wrapping around. It's had some northerly shear in that dry air, but once it organizes itself, it'll move right out over into the Gulf of Mexico, and the waters are hot, and the conditions appear favorable for significant strengthening, okay? The rainfall flood threat is going to be very severe there, especially in areas of western Louisiana and areas here along the Texas-Louisiana border. This is a very sensitive graphic. It's going to change every 6 to 10 hours, but as of right now, excessive rainfall likely as mid to late week arrives, and we'll have Laura pushing in. Of course, the biggest threat right now, other than winds of Category 2 or higher, is the storm surge. Right now, the Hurricane Center is saying 7 to 11 feet here in areas of Sabine Lake, Vermilion Bay. These are very low-lying, marshy areas, so if you live in a mobile home or on some of these barrier islands, listen to local officials for when the evacuations come, because the right side of Laura is likely to have a huge onshore flow of water rise. Morgan City, 4 to 6 feet. Mouth of the Mississippi, 3 to 5 feet. Over here near Galveston Bay, 2 to 4, 4 to 6 near High Island. All of this is also time sensitive. So if Laura becomes a stronger hurricane than we're predicting, you'll see these rates of storm surge go up dramatically. The computer models, this is the GFS computer model, and you can see they're pretty tightly clustered somewhere here in the Houston area on over towards Cameron Parish. And then we had the European models, these are the 12Zs, which are pretty far west here. Most of them make landfall in Texas. And so we've seen kind of a westward trend. The Hurricane Center's not buying that yet. They believe there'll be enough of a break in the ridging to cause Laura to make that turn into Louisiana. But again, if you're on the upper Texas coast, do not let your guard down at all. And I heard there are some evacuations taking place now in Galveston. That's the smart thing to do right now. You can see the hurricane models, the HMON, make Laura a major hurricane here in areas here of Holly Beach, Sabine Pass, Cameron. You guys would be impacted. The H-Wharf model makes Laura almost a Category 5 and has it coming ashore there along the mid-Louisiana coastline. But you can see a lot of the ensembles here want to take it to Texas. So even though we're starting to get better agreement with the main model guidance that it's going to hit extreme western Louisiana, you can't let your guard down if you're anywhere from the mid-Texas coast all the way back over to the eastern and southeastern areas of Louisiana. Laura is going to be too severe a hurricane, it looks like, to want to mess around with. So the key messages: number one, Laura is forecast to reach the northwest Gulf Coast as a hurricane late Wednesday, early Thursday. Don't focus on the details because there's a lot of uncertainty. Storm surge, wind, rainfall, that's going to extend far away from Laura's center, especially on the right side. Number two, there is a risk of life-threatening storm surge from San Luis past Texas to Ocean Springs, Mississippi in the next 48 hours, and they'd issue a storm surge watch for those areas. And if you're in a low-lying area, you got to listen to the local officials. Number three, hurricane conditions possible late Wednesday from Port Bolivar all the way to west of Morgan City. Tropical storm conditions will start a lot sooner, by Wednesday afternoon, and they have that hurricane watch. And they may shift hurricane watches farther south along the Texas coast if that track shifts to the west. So if you're in Texas along the coast, High Island, Galveston Bay, keep an eye out. And number four, tropical storm conditions and heavy rainfall still for western Cuba tonight. Mudslides and life-threatening flash flooding are possible. Now we're going to turn to Marco, and Marco is very near landfall in the United States, but the reason I put Marco second is that it's falling apart very quickly. It's at 29.0 north, 88.9 west, winds to 40, very low-end tropical storm. It's moving northwest at 7. It's going to be a depression weakening as it pulls into Louisiana. Heavy rainfall and gusty winds are possible, but right now the impact from Marco seems minuscule compared to what Laura is going to do. Here's the visible satellite imagery, and you see this circulation center is actually falling apart. Even the naked swirl is falling apart. So naked Marco headed into Louisiana, but again, most of the thunderstorms are getting sheared off here towards the northeast. In fact, if we look at the radar, you can see the heaviest rain appears to be from Gulf Shores on over to Apalachicola, and then extending up with the interaction there with the troughiness throughout Georgia and South Carolina. A very moist day for the southeastern U.S. Some thunderstorms moving here alongside Marco, scraping the west coast of Florida. And if you look carefully, see over the long-range Cuban radar, see right there? That's Laura. Laura is peeking on in. So again, we're going to continue to watch, and the focus from here on out on these updates is not going to be on Marco. It's going to be on our Laura taking shape there south of Cuba. It's still got a little bit of dry air to deal with, a little bit of northerly shear, but it looks like once it gets into the Gulf tomorrow, all systems are go. Anybody from the mid-Texas coast on over to Louisiana, be overlooking your hurricane plans. Make sure you've got the flashlights, the batteries, the bottled waters. Never use generators inside. They cause carbon monoxide. And listen to local officials for any evacuation orders. I'm Mike Naso, and I'll be back with continuous coverage of Laura.